Welcome to Accelerate. Chris, thank you for joining us today. You spent 12 years in strength and conditioning before moving into psychology. What did you see in elite athletes that made you realise that the mental side was where the real performance gains were hiding?
Yeah, hi Nicola. Again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me on. First of all, thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me on. Um, as you say, so yeah, I started off as a strength conditioning coach, 12 years. I was working in cricket, domestic cricket in the UK. A great time to be involved in that. It was very much in its infancy around um, kind of a bit of a shift in the sport from a physiological perspective. So a really interesting time to be a strength and conditioning coach at that time. But there was something that kind of kept coming back to me when I was doing this, and you looked at performance, as I'm quite interested in, and there were inconsistencies when like looking across the board physiologically. The players that I worked with were all kind of there or thereabouts. Again, some would be slightly better in certain aspects than others, but again, just generally speaking, it was relatively level. Yet performances were quite indifferent. Um, and so yeah, I guess it took me down a bit of a kind of psychological rabbit hole, first of all. Um, and the more I kind of explored it, the more I found that certain players adopted certain frameworks or systems or principles. Again, often not that consciously, and often not like that consistently, but that seemed to be the differentiator. And so, to start with, to enhance my strength and conditioning coaching, I studied an undergrad psychology degree. I just wanted to understand psychology more. And again, I think a lot of people are in that. Just when you're in that coaching sphere, then you're looking to explore other elements, I guess. And the more I studied, then the more I thought, actually, there's yeah, this lends itself more to my way of thinking a little bit. And so it was great because I was working full time as a strength and conditioning coach while studying psychology. Did an undergrad, did a master's, ended up doing my chartership, um, with some kind of idea that I could be this hybrid S&C psych, um, in the same environment, which I tried for a little bit and probably wasn't as successful as I thought. And so yeah, I guess that was the forcing factor to say, okay, to if I want to continue certainly working in elite sport, then was that more through a strength conditioning role, or more through a psychology role. And so to date, I'm about 12 years in each. I did 12 years as an S&C and probably transitioned full time as a psych, and have done around about the same amount of time um, exclusively as a psychologist.
So you actually had to find a point where as you say, ideally the ideal would be in that holistic offering, but you had to decide between the two.
Yeah, I guess at that time the idea in my head was this holistic offering. But I think it's, but like I say, I could still operate as a strength and conditioning coach and be quite psychologically informed.
Yeah.
But I think it was more than that. I think it was actually just to really throw myself into it and say, right, and I guess at that point again, I think my passion was clearly moving more towards the psychology side. Um,
Yeah.
as I say, super fortunate to have that experience as an S&C, and again, I think quite unique to be in one discipline and then convert to another discipline. I don't think there's many in elite sport that kind of transition over disciplines whilst still kind of, for the most part, staying in that kind of environment.
I think I agree. Like some people will have moved from, say, for example, a practitioner to a founder kind of role, but it's unlikely that they would have moved from two different practitioner role. I really think that is quite unique. You may specialize more, like be an S&C and go really specialist into speed or
Yep.
um, yeah, it's strength, but yeah, to actually shift a completely different discipline, I do think that is quite unique.
Yep. Yeah. No. And again, I think it like that it is unique. It's not different. It's not better or worse. It's just like I say. I think I'm in a really good place to be able to call on my experience as an S&C as a psychologist. Again, I've worked through certain roles, but one role that I worked in was from a psychology perspective, was in a rehabilitation setting. And so again, to have that underlying understanding and knowledge from an S&C perspective, I think really helped me deliver psychology better in that environment. Although my role or responsibility was nothing to do with S&C, there's some very some excellent practitioners from that perspective. But just to have that background, I think just really helped to like understand a lot of the problems that we were seeing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, your work in from a psychology sphere, you've worked with Olympians, but you've also now crossed into kind of business and entrepreneurship. Do you see psychological similarities, and where are there kind of comparisons between when you're working with athletes and you're working with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I guess the reason for going into that kind of corporate world a little bit more was because I think there were some like a number of similarities. I think if we just take performance as a concept, then again, as much as it means different and as much as it's nuanced in those different environments, I think performance like underpins everything that both elite sporting environments and successful businesses or corporate environments are looking at. And so that was my kind of thought process to it. I think there are far more similarities than differences, but I guess there probably are a couple of subtleties that you need to be recognizing. I didn't want to go into those business environments and just deliver sporting anecdotes or examples and just try and kind of, I guess, cookie cut that model and just put into business. As much as that kind of might help or inform, I think I really wanted to understand that environment as well. And so again, yeah, I think a lot of similarities, probably a few subtleties, and I think that's where the difference is probably made.
A lot of people talk about kind of high performance. What does that mean to you personally, as a either definition or a way of living?
Yeah, seems quite a common question now, doesn't it? A number of podcasts and books, and yeah, what is high performance? I guess to me, certainly more recently, I think, is that my belief is that we've all got an infinite potential. So high performance to me is continuing to fulfill what I believe is that infinite potential. So not to put any limits on ourselves, not to get too kind of embroiled in one particular endeavor or one particular area. I think it's just that exploration to say, if I want to keep raising the ceiling, then I can, but understanding where that is. So yeah, to me, high performance is fulfilling that infinite potential that I think we're all capable of.
I like that. I can't remember if it was from my mum or my dad, but around glass ceilings, and
Yeah.
we tend to either place them on ourselves, or even sometimes it's society, or actually, it could be that it's put on us because of a job title or an
Yep.
identity that
Yep.
does or doesn't, like, we either perceive it exists or it actually physically does exist because of the structure. Or have you found that both from, I suppose, an athletic population, but also founders, where they kind of even fuse their identity with what their job title is or their company that they're building, and what does that create? Is that a positive? Is it a negative? What struggles can it create for people?
Great question, Nicola, and that is one of the similarities, like we spoke about previously, between those two areas. I think, again, that athletic identity or that business identity is very similar. Speaking from an athletic population, I probably again have seen that more and got more experience within that. A number of people will describe themselves as that, right? And so I am an athlete. This is who I am, and then all of a sudden, if I'm not that for some reason, then who am I? Yeah. So at the end of a career, or if an athlete gets injured or what have you, then that identity is then gone. And so, like, who does that mean I am now? So again, the difficulty, I think, with having such a forged identity or fixed identity on something is it becomes very binary. Yeah, and then the relationship to outcome has a direct correlation or effect on how I am or who I am, my self-worth. So if I win, then I'm good, and if I'm not, then I'm bad. And so, like, so many times you could go into environments. I could go into environments like without knowing a result or without knowing the outcome, and straight away you kind of can see a behavioral representation as to what that looked like, right? So I'm not saying outcome isn't important. Of course it is, especially in performance and especially in sport. But outcomes shouldn't define who we are. I guess then what I saw working with, like I say, with founders or with business leaders, C-suite, is it's very similar. Again, it's like I am that, like, this is who I am. And if I'm not that, and again, you can look on people's LinkedIn profiles, and they describe themselves as ex-CEO. They're still identifying with the thing that they were, right? That's still in their LinkedIn bio, ex-CEO of whatever. Okay, and to me, it's just like who actually are you? So I think it's obviously a critical point, right? Again, whatever realm we're in, then there's an association or relationship with what we do, but that shouldn't define who we are. Yeah. Again, if I say, like, what do you do, is a common question when we meet, right? What do you do? Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Oh, I am. This is who I am. If I ask you why you do it, then that's probably takes a little bit more thought to answer. Not too sure. And more often than not, answer them with a what answer as well, right? So it's not, you don't answer why you're doing it. You answer what you're doing it for.
Yeah, completely. I personally went through that when I gave up my physiotherapy registration with HCPC. For probably at that point maybe 15 years, I'd had that question, what do you do? And I could just roll off my tongue, I'm a physiotherapist. And everyone had different, I suppose, levels of understanding what that was, but it was quite a common understanding or a common language. And then to not be able to say that was quite challenging for a period of time. And then I was a business owner, and then I sold that business. And again, it was like, what do I say anymore? But I kind of wonder, is it that I need to have a better elevator pitch or that equivalent kind of language? Or do we, as humans, need to stop asking that question and actually ask us to say more of how do you spend your time? And then it's not directly related to work, or it's actually, because we all wear, even with work, you wear loads of different hats from the point of view of, for me personally, like a mother, a partner, a friend, a sister, a daughter, an auntie. Like but we do put this pressure, or at least this pin on that job title or that identity. And when you lose that, that's a real loss of, I suppose, your sense of self. And as you say, you alluded to athletes when they change careers, or maybe their career ends. I assume you've seen that also from a founder perspective when they've, as you say, exited a business, or even that business may have failed, and what happens psychologically there. And I suppose also, how can people prepare for that? Because it will happen at some point.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot around, like, similar to the high performance kind of rhetoric at the moment. I think there's a lot around, like, understanding your why and what's your purpose and find your passion and those kind of things. And again, it's become quite common and quite overused. But I think there are some really important factors to consider, and like when we do ask those questions. For one, I think, again, we got to understand our brain is very good at being quite objective and giving, like, objective information back, right? So if you ask me what I do, then I can articulate that and tell you what I do, right? By a label or by a descriptor, or I'm a psychologist. If you ask me why I do it, then now this comes into the emotional part of the brain that we all know isn't very good at being descriptive in terms of, again, oftentimes if I'm feeling an emotion, I put a label on it to try and describe what the emotion is. That's probably not what I'm feeling, right? Oh, I feel sad. But do I actually feel sad, or is that just the easiest descriptor to try and articulate this kind of all these emotions playing out. And so it's not easy to explain why we do things. The other bit is, I don't think, like, if we've not been asked a question, then why would we know what the answer is, right? So if we've never sat back and thought about it, like, actually, why am I doing this? As opposed to, again, it's just by chance, or that's just what's happened, or again, that's if we're not asked the question, then we can't be kind of considered to be able to know ourselves why that looks like. So again, I think it's asking the right kind of questions to yourself and to others to try and get that out in terms of like what sits beneath the surface. And again, I believe not I don't think everybody follows this thought, but I believe, again, if you really understand what that is, what that why is, then if I lifted you out of that environment, so if I lifted you out of a professional sport environment and put you into, I don't know, again, let's just use those two, a business environment, you'd expect that to show up the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, a lot around like what you really believe, what you stand for, what values are important, and what values you're actually living, as opposed to what I say I think I should say.
Yeah. I think that's really important because that's we see it probably in a practical sense from the point of view of, oh, they've got transferable skills that can go in different ways, but actually there's a deeper level to that of they know why they do things, and therefore, as you say, it doesn't really matter what environment it is or what the outcome even is, like winning goals or earning money for a business kind of thing, driving revenue. You can still use the same skill set because it's more tied to you than the job title. So yeah, I think that's also when you see some interesting people who have worn lots of different hats in their careers and their life, because they're probably quite deep rooted to who they are and why they're doing it, rather than having to be in that structured organization or solely I have to work in pro sport.
Yeah, again, I think that's true success. I think we can endure, regardless of what domain we're in, I think we can endure a great deal more than we think we can if we really understand why we're doing the thing. I think if that's superficial or surface level or imitation, I'm saying this is why I'm doing it, because I think that's what I should be saying, as opposed to what, like, the reason is to why I'm really doing it. I think, like you say, when the stakes then really get high, that's the difference between good and great, across all domains. Yeah.
Bringing slightly that kind of the business side back into the conversation, and you talked about we're all capable of more. Probably one of the things that founders, or if you're running a business, face a lot is rejection. You're constantly being rejected or told, don't do that, or that's a bad idea, and that can be from kind of investors or customers or people in the team. How do people practically, I suppose, build that capacity to absorb, because it knocks your confidence on a regular basis? Does that again come back to that why, or is there something else to that psychologically?
Yeah, I think, again, there's a number of things that I think it feeds into that to a degree. It comes back into the identity piece. So again, I think all of this starts with an awareness. If I understand who I am, how I respond, how I react, how I behave, then I've got more chance to be able to influence it when things happen, right? But again, if I don't do the work, if I don't understand that, then how can I? So it's literally, I'm just going to be reactive in terms of, okay, well, this has happened, and so I'm just going to treat it as I think. So again, something that I advocate is everything starts from awareness. Okay, I need to understand. So if we take rejection as an example, then how I, again, respond or react, which are two different things. How I respond or react to that rejection is going to be different to how you respond or react to that rejection, based on our unique dispositions. Okay, there might be similarities, but again, based on our behavioral preferences, our early childhood experiences, our makeup, then it's going to be unique to us. So by understanding more of myself, I can influence or impact things more effectively, right? So that's the first bit. I think once I've done that work, then again, what does that mean in terms of how I look at rejection or failure? And And again, some of us will be very much more towards an opportunistic thinking or view of the world in terms of, okay, I'll just brush myself off and get on to the next thing. Yeah. Whereas others are more towards, okay, I'm thinking, I'm more sensitive to what could go wrong or the threat that is there. And so again, just based on that continuum, one isn't right or wrong. We've all got an ability to be able to shift up, but we probably populate, again, individually somewhere along that continuum of sensitivity to threat or sensitivity to reward. And so again, like understanding where I am on that and what my default is on that is going to be really impactful then in terms of how I deal with failure or rejection, right?
Yeah.
And I think the final thing, not to go on too much, but again, like, what do those things mean to us? Like, what does failure actually mean? I mean, there's some failure that you look at, or you get things wrong, rejection wrong, then you probably look back and say, actually, there was a part of that process that I could have done better. Yeah, it was just remiss of me to miss that bit out, or I didn't prepare for that or whatever. And so again, these things are solvable. Whereas again, I think there's other bits that are probably knowledge gaps. Again, I get rejection because, okay, well, I didn't know in that moment, and so I've got to be quite open to then learning from that experience, as opposed to just dismissing it as, okay, well, that was terrible, and then, like you say, then feeding that into that identity piece and saying, okay, well, I'm not up for this. These feelings of imposterism or whatever that brings is just, okay, what does it mean? So yeah, it's very complex, but similarly, if we kind of understand what the component parts are, then we can simplify it.
I think there's also an element there of like remembering that knowing yourself isn't like a tick box exercise. Oh, I know myself, I'm done now. Like it's something, it's a lifelong, because you change through your life as well. So it's not like, oh, I know my childhood and now I'm an adult, and that's again like a box. It's like I'm an adult, but I'm not the same person in my 40s as I was in my 20s anyway. So it's a daily, and as you say, it's like how I deal with rejection. I know how my default might be, but actually on that day, have I had breakfast? Did I sleep okay last night? Was it really stressful, like commute getting into work, and then you're having a conversation with someone that, so it's awareness, I suppose, like on a macro level, but also just even in that moment on that day, how do I feel? How am I going to react to this?
Yep. Yeah. We're all going to have a behavioral preference. And I think this is something that is probably quite a common misconception, is that who we, like, again, goes back to the identity, who we are defines us. Yeah. So again, like, we'll often answer, like, I'm not that sort of person, or I'm that kind of person. And again, we very much associate with the label. I think, again, what we need to understand is that we can adapt. We can be whatever we want to be. If first of all, if we know what that is, and then if we know how to. Yeah. So like you say, this constant evolution of our, whatever we want to call it, our personality or our behavioral tendencies, like the fundamentals of it probably aren't going to change significantly, but my ability to recognize when that's serving me and recognize when that might be more of a hindrance, and then an ability to be able to transition to another kind of preference or style, that's where that continual kind of development is. And like you said, it goes back to that infinite potential. It's like, I don't know anybody who's won the game. I don't know anybody who's mastered the game yet. Nobody's got this sorted. It's this constant pursuit. If you want it to be, yeah. Some people are quite happy to operate at the level that they're at. And I think this is the other bit when we talk around performance, is that like, if you continually want to push that performance boundary, then again, it's probably then that continual investment into trying to see what I am capable of. But some people will get to a point and say, "See, I'm content with where I'm at. Like, let me just consolidate there and operate it here."
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things I kind of pull out from what you said there, like that ability to be adaptable. So understanding, and I suppose on a really, really physiological level, like neuroplasticity, and that the brain can adapt, but also as a personality being coachable as well, like be adaptable to how how we respond to people, situations, environments as well. Those are probably, I suppose, kind of two words that I was pulling out of that, of what you were saying there.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, just understanding that we can, first of all. So that's the neuroplasticity bit, or just that again, that whole notion of just because I might operate kind of more towards a preference the majority of the time, and like acknowledge that and accept that. By the way, like again, there's no one preference better than the other.
Yeah.
Nobody's got the monopoly on this. If that's who I am, if that's how I show up, then great. But then, like I say, when is it useful for me to either just affect what my preference is towards somebody else, or potentially try and influence the other person to then be able to flex towards where I'm at? And again, I think what we get caught up with is that we need to find this kind of happy medium. Do you know what I mean? We need to meet in the middle. And oftentimes it's not that at all. I probably just need to be a little less of this, or in this instance, I might just need you to be a little bit more of that. But let's not
Yeah.
try and just find this perfect kind of harmony all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk like within sport, athletes have off seasons, they have programs, structured recovery, teams around them for support. Quite often, founders, or even within my experience is predominantly within small businesses rather than kind of large corporates, they don't have that
Yeah.
aspect to it. What's the impact of not having that support?
Yeah, just like again from a physiological perspective, and again, this is where I can use those learnings and have probably adopted some of those principles into to psychology. Just like from a physiological perspective, if I don't have those periods of restoration, then at some point I'm going to break, right? I'm going to be injured, or something, or my performance is going to be impaired. I think psychologically it's exactly the same. Right. So again, if we put load on ourselves all the time, and again, let's call it this cognitive load for this. If I'm constantly adding and adding and adding, then at some point, I've got no more capacity for this. Again, it probably leads to what is commonly known as burnout. And
Yeah.
again, I think is a term that has been used. There's a clinical definition of burnout, and I think there's just probably a more kind of general population understanding of what burnout is. And burnout probably is just like I'm wiped and can't go to work tomorrow, or probably
Yeah.
get ill, or something like that. But essentially, burnout is that like I've not got the capacity to operate at the level that I need to at the moment. So again,
Yeah.
what I would advocate for is understanding periods of when my capacity is going to be needed, i.e., periods of high performance. Okay. But knowing that if I'm in that phase, that is going to compromise my well-being. Okay. Example: if I'm a founder and I'm putting in 16-hour days, right, to try and get this thing off the ground, or that's what I feel is required. I'm a small team and I need to wear a lot of hats and whatever. Okay. Then for that period of time, it might be okay. Well, I'm only having 4, 5, 6 hours of probably broken, uninterrupted sleep. Okay, I can only do that for a certain period before, like, again, physiologically, I'm just going to be like, I've got nothing here, or my performance
Yeah.
is compromised. So it's recognizing that, okay, well, if I need to do that for now, then I know that my well-being is going to be compromised. But then I need to be intentional in reinvesting in my well-being. So where's now my period of restoration to say, okay, performance-wise, it's probably going to take a bit of a hit, but I'm recharging the battery. Yeah, I'm now taking care of myself and looking after myself. And if we do that intentionally, if we do that well, then again, there's no reason why we don't hit those kind of hard stops. We should be able to continue. And actually, just like anything, if we manage it really well, then it should actually increase our capacity to continue. So absolutely, just working in cycles, or working in, like you say, like you look at it from typically a periodization kind of model within other elements, in terms of like, let's look at a block of time. Here's where I need to peak, or these are really important kind of landmarks across this period. Okay, so if those are the times where I really need to be on my A game, then where do I need to fit in this time to allow me the ability to recover, repair, and go and keep going.
Yeah. It's so hard though, because obviously in startup world, everything is ambiguous, uncertain. One week will change to the next week,
Yeah.
but that's why, if anything you can do is focus internally on how do I perform at my best, what can I do, and where can I suppose create any elements of control. Then at least that protects me and my well-being,
Yeah.
which isn't a selfish thing to do. I think that's the other aspect. I just want to jog back very briefly onto that failure aspect. It's so interesting because I think it's so cultural as well, isn't it? And you work obviously with global athletes and also, I assume, entrepreneurs and business. Within the UK, we really run away from failure. We don't like it at all culturally, is my perception. I went and did one of my MBA modules in San Francisco, and it was very much like, we want you to fail. We want
Yeah.
to see your resilience. We want to see that you'll come back again and you'll go again. Like, we will invest in those entrepreneurs, where I'd say UK and Europe is much more risk averse to that. What's your kind of take on that difference from a, as I say, maybe a cultural or geographical aspect of failure?
Yeah, again, I mean, in terms of exposure to responses from different cultures, then I guess I'm relatively limited in my experience there. Most of my work has been UK based. But I think just I would agree with it. I think our relationship, just even with the word, isn't that great. And so again, I think first of all defining like or understanding what it is. And like I say, there are some things that we're going to get wrong, probably because of what we've done, right? Probably because of our own fault. But normally they're pretty quick fixes. Yeah, normally those things are just like, oh, again, I missed doing that bit, or I missed that step out, or I just overlooked that. And so again, it's a relatively kind of easy win to then get back to that point. I think again, understanding like similarly understanding what success is important here. So what is it that I'm trying to go after? What do I want to try and attain or accomplish in this instance? And again, I think you've used the word control, and I think it goes back to what again has become quite a common cliche. But again, like, is our attention on the things that we actually can control, or the things that are outside of our influence and outside of our control? So it might be that I didn't achieve my objective, i.e., I've failed because of something that was totally out of my influence or control, right? And so again, if I reflect on that, then what would I do differently? Well, it may be that I don't do anything differently. It might just reinforce what I do and be understanding that, like, if I continue to do this, at some point it's probably gonna break through. But we become very reactive. You see it in sport a lot. Yeah. So you don't get the result, or you don't get the win. And so, okay, let's rip up the playbook and start again. And if you're continually doing that, then how can you expect to be consistent? So I think something that psychology does really well is reflection and reflective practice. Okay, so as a practitioner, then it's embedded within our practice to say, right, essentially, after any kind of client call, consultation, whatever that looks like, then again, work through whatever process works well for you, but reflect on that to then be able to understand, okay, what happened, first of all. That's the important first step, by the way. Like, what actually happened, not what did I think happened or how did I feel that went. What were the facts? And then go on to the emotion. Okay, so based on what actually happened, now how do I feel? What was good or bad about it? What might I do differently? To then give me some conclusion and action to say, okay, well, again, if I'm faced with a similar situation, it might be I do exactly the same thing, or it might be, okay, well, here's some changes to do, and like, it goes back to that constant evolution. If I then keep adding to that database, it gives me more to be able to draw on in different situations, as opposed to just a one size fits all approach. So going back to the question, I think again, if we're going to talk about success or failure, then really understand for ourselves what those two things mean. Put some really clear definition on it, and then what does that lead to? So similarly, if I'm just winning or celebrating my successes all the time without necessarily understanding why or how, again, that's probably as much as grieving my failures. Yeah. So
We can
again, just
definitely
having
lead to
that,
blind spots, can't
right,
it? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So just
Yeah.
having an understanding as to what those two things mean, and probably, like I say, that the easiest thing to do is the line down the middle of the page and, okay, well, what was within my influence or control and what was outside of my influence or control. And that
Yeah.
probably gives you enough kind of data points to say, okay, that, like, what does that mean for me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a good kind of practical way of thinking of it because, as you say, the emotion can quite, or depending who you are as a personality, the emotion can quite easily take hold, especially in
Yeah.
high stakes environments, which kind of startup world and sport love. And so, yeah, going back to kind of actually what those facts are as well is so important.
Yeah.
We've talked about there like kind of high stake moments or um, like is that the whole mental framework that you would encourage people to look at? Are there any other elements as well?
In terms of just operating at their best.
Yeah, operating, but also in those kind of high stake moments,
Yeah.
either from a success or failure.
Yeah.
Um, because I think quite often we just don't even give it the time. So once we actually do give it the time, as you say, you've described like a mental framework that people can work through there practically.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, like, we need to know how we operate at our best. So again, when I work with athletes, then this is commonly kind of referred to as an ideal performance state or an optimal performance state, right? So for you to perform at your best, then like what is required? And again, similarly, this is quite difficult to articulate because it's not like this bullet point list of this, and this. A lot of it is to do with like how we feel or what our emotion is. Okay.
Yeah.
But again, if I've got some understanding as to what that looks like, so again, just as a really easy start point, as a practical tip for here, right? For me to operate at my best, then thinking about a scale of 1 to 10, one being, again, from a state perspective, like being super relaxed and calm, and whereas a 10 is like highly aroused or whatever that, on that kind of arousal state line, if you like. Like highly charged, highly wired. So where would I need to operate? And if so say I operate best maybe a 6 out of 10. Okay, that's again just a very rudimental scale. But if a 6 out of 10 just means I'm slightly more aroused and relaxed, but I'm not kind of bouncing off the walls. Yeah, I think if we've got that reference point, then again goes back to the awareness. If I know what that reference point is, and then I go into a situation and I'm not where I think I should be, then at least I know where I need to orientate back to, right? But if I
Yeah.
don't know what that is, then again, the irony is, I think we're probably going to remove ourselves even further away, right? So again, if I feel kind of anxious going into this high stakes situation, and I don't know if this level of anxiety is right or not, then the irony is I'm probably going to become even more anxious by not knowing how anxious I should feel. So it takes me even further away from where I want to go. So I think just trying to understand, for me to perform at my best, then what are some of the requirements? And if I know what those things are, then if it's not where it should be or where I'd like it to be, then what are some kind of pretty straightforward interventions, skills, strategies that I can implement in that moment to be able to at least get me somewhere towards where I think I should be. Can I just add another point?
Of
Sorry.
course.
Again, and that when another thing that we know is that when we're under pressure, we become even more fixed or we become even more rigid. So circling back to our point around adaptability, right? You think of the times where we're really under the pump, those are the times where we need to be as adaptable as we can possibly be, right? But we're the opposite. Our brain will just like hone in and just be like, right, really like laser vision on your default or your preference. So again, an understanding of that, I think, is really useful because again, when I'm going into high pressure situations or high stakes situations, just a reminder to say, right, if I allow myself, I'm going to become even more fixed or rigid, which is going to serve me to a point. Yeah. But then again, if I overdo it or exclusively do that, then that's probably going to become a limitation.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the aspect that I don't think we always give enough credit for is you have to experience these things. You have to, like, we do a lot of the physical reps, don't we, from an S&C perspective. We really don't give the time to those mental reps, from either how to communicate, how to have challenging conversations, how to overcome rejection, failure. Like, I haven't had a huge amount of exposure to it, but some of the most useful sessions I remember also from my MBA wasn't like the theory of a framework. It was actually, we're going to imitate a board here, and they're about to do something which is ethically and morally questionable. How are you going to have these conversations? So we don't give reps to probably that mental side in the same way we do physical. Do you find that as well?
Very much, very much. And again, this is kind of why I'm really enjoying being in this space at the moment, because again, I see it as a coaching perspective. So, I've said this a couple of times, and again, it's probably not that popular an opinion, but psychology, I don't think, is that great at application. Really good at theory, research, again, like understanding, but not always that great at converting some of that academic, or those academic findings, into practical application. And that's certainly a gap that I'm trying to bridge. And so it's not all about consumption. Like you say, somebody could listen to this, or somebody could read a book or listen to a pod, and again, it's of interest, right? These things, okay, yeah, I understand it, and it's cool. But what does that change? What does that change? And so again, I think the two things to elicit change is, first of all, giving somebody a choice. Yeah. So somebody might have heard something on there that they may not be aware of, and so again, an alternative view or a different kind of concept that I wasn't aware of gives me a choice to operate away from what I would normally do. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people quite like the choice bit, but like you say, that often then the missing piece is the bit that is critical afterwards, the action. Okay. What am I going to do with that choice? So now I go and do something with that. Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to go in and see if I can be more adaptable. Okay, I'm going to be less of this and a little bit more of this. And I'm going to do this live experiment within my environment, within my context to do it. I'm actually going to do the thing. And then I think, to close the loop, then we need to reflect on that experience, because I think there's probably a few different outcomes that could happen, right? It could have a significantly different effect, i.e., like, this was a real positive impact. This change I can see by me being more adaptable is going to be really useful going forwards. In which case, I'm probably going to employ that more as I go forwards, right? I'm going to adapt. It might be that what I did was indifferent. I don't think it had a positive or a negative effect, whatever that effect means. In which case, again, gives me a little bit of kind of agency or choice to say, okay, I could do it, or I might just do what I've always done. Yeah. Or it might actually have, again, I don't want to use the word negative, but it might not have the effect that I wanted, in which case, again, it probably validates what I was doing before was okay, right? But unless I kind of go, absolutely. I mean, that's a really, I'd hope that happens more often than not, right? I'm not doing everything and saying, okay, this is better than I was doing. A lot of us are doing things really well. So sometimes we need to validate and acknowledge that what we are doing is good. But again, so if I continue through that cycle, so I'm understanding some of these things, which has given me choice to be able to apply them. I then go and action them. I then go and apply them, and then I reflect on that process to say, okay, well, what was the result of it? If I continue to do that, and like I say, it's just this constant pursuit. Some of those things we'll put off, we'll delay, we won't do, for fear of like what the consequence or conclusion is. And again, I would encourage everybody to go do the thing. because the likelihood is to the story that that internal narrative is telling you what could potentially happen is very rarely true. The world ain't going to end. Yeah,
No.
it might be a bit uncomfortable. It might make me feel a bit, oh geez, but again, it's those kind of things. But we quite easily escalate those things to just being like, okay, well, that's the thing that's stopping me. So
Yeah,
go
yeah,
do it, put it into practice, see what actually happens, and I'm pretty sure that what the result isn't anything like the narrative that you probably built up in your mind.
yeah. I always relate this to, like, sometimes, let's say a practitioner who I think majority of this audience will be, who has an idea. It's like, just go do it, just go try
Yep.
it. You've got to go
Yep.
validate it in some real world
Yep.
context to know, is there a business there that I want to pursue? Do I like that? What? So we obviously have become quite a data obsessed world, but um you do need action to create, or something has to happen to get information that
Yep.
then allows us to make a decision going forward. So yeah, I think that experiential learning, or just experiences as a whole, like, say yes, go do it, go travel, go see someone, go have that conversation, because you just never know where it's going to go.
Yep. Yep. We're far more capable of change than I think we give ourselves credit for. So that's one thing. The other bit is, what I'm not suggesting is that we're trying to be something that we're not. Okay. Like I say, an understanding as to who we are and acknowledging and accepting who we are is really important.
Mm.
It's how I can refine that, how I can optimize that further, as opposed to, right, I shouldn't be this, I should be that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's situational and it's contextual, as opposed to this kind of overhaul is to, like, I'm trying to recreate myself here. It's really just this constant iteration and constant build. And like I said, I kind of describe it as just very subtle dial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just can I keep just dialing, 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 dialing. And before long, like you say, like incrementally, then the difference to those kind of baselines are just significant if I keep putting it into practice.
It's probably one of the aspects of modern life, isn't it, that we're looking for that quick fix, or some
Yeah.
sudden realization, or the lightning bolt goes, but the boring, um, continuous discipline related work is the
Yes.
bit that is what actually makes the
Yeah.
difference,
Yeah.
but doesn't get the kind of media hype in the same way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, it's constant iteration. It's constant kind of, like I said, as much as you want it to be, as opposed to, right, all of a sudden I'm just going to do this thing, put it into practice, and then, like you say, expect fireworks to be going off.
Chris, as a final kind of closing, you've worked with Olympians, you've worked in those kind of high pro sport environments. Is there one thing that you learned about humans, when they're at that limits, that you didn't expect?
I guess it probably ties in pretty much everything that we've spoken about. I think if I was to really try and give you, I try and give you a succinct answer. I don't think I have it so far. I think the more we understand why we're doing the thing, then, uh, like, genuinely know why that is, then I think that gives us, like, that allows us to be able to endure a great deal more than we think we can. So again, just looking back at it, probably examples of those that I feel have really kind of optimized, or continue to optimize that infinite potential. I think they've got a pretty good understanding as to why they're doing it. It's very unique to them. I think I've failed. I'm not succinct. I'm going again. Sorry. Um,
No, it's great.
I think the other, so as much as that is there, I think almost paradoxically they've got a relationship with, but if it was to end tomorrow, then that's okay as well. Do you see what I mean? They've got a really deep, like a really deep understanding of why they're doing it, and that is, like, super, super, super important to them. But they can also weigh that up with, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, or if this was to end tomorrow, like I say, then okay, I gave it my best shot.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's again, I don't particularly like the word balance. I don't think it's a balance between those two things, but I just think it's a relationship between those two things, and I think that is critical. I think again, I've kind of seen the same in business to a degree, right? That again, like founders, CEOs, like they're so in it. That's so important to them. But those that kind of, I believe that the ones that I've witnessed to be like super successful in their pursuit, and successful doesn't mean objective metrics. Successful just means in how they're conducting themselves on a day-to-day basis. I've almost just got this kind of, yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm going for, and I'm going to put everything into it. But if it doesn't, then so be it. You
Yeah.
know?
I think that's a really great observation, because sometimes it's just about sustainability. Like, you've just got to
Yeah,
stay in the game, and therefore, if you've got that drive and ambition, but the realism of it's not everything. Like, it's not at that
yeah,
extreme that
yeah,
I'm going to lose everything else
yeah,
as a result. Then it
yeah,
probably keeps you quite grounded still in that sustainable performance as
yeah.
well.
But you can see
Yeah,
again how what we've talked about today. So the identity piece comes into that. The kind of ability to be able to adapt to different situations comes to that. The things in terms of like how my relationship between control and what I can't control, definitely my relationship with rejection or failure or whatever that looks like. So all of these things kind of they're all threads that come through to that. But
most
yeah,
definitely. Chris, thank you. I loved this conversation. It really speaks to my psychology and physical kind of mind as well. So thank you very much. Chris, if people want to find out more about your work and what you do, where should we direct them to?
yeah. Again, probably the two channels that I use most are Instagram and LinkedIn. So again, just Chris Bodman _ on Instagram, and then Chris Bodman on LinkedIn. So just have a look at that. Again, I'm super passionate about making this what is often, like I say, complicated area, complex area, as understandable and as practical as possible. And so again, just check out those two channels, and there's suggestions, resources, newsletters, etc. that hopefully kind of break through some of that noise.
And you do some fantastic infographics that I think really breaks this down into simple terms as well. So thank you for those.
Great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Nicola. Thank you.